What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for February 18th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the podcast. It is Tuesday, so it's time for a little positivity / motivation, and we're going to go to the Eagles well one last time this year, and something that Nick Sirianni had said all year. He echoed it after the Super Bowl. He echoed it again at the parade. And obviously, there's a lot of football meaning behind this, but I also think it's something we can take into our everyday life. And that is, you can't be great without the greatness of others. And from a football perspective, obviously, it's a team game. Everybody had to do their job. We talked about it all year with the 3 keys to the game. Do your job and let the game sort of play out as it will. You need great support from your teammates. But in your everyday life, it's the same thing. You need support from your teammates, and whether that's your family, your friends, co-workers, whatever the situation may be, you need the support and the greatness of others and to be great. You can do it alone, but it's going to make that much tougher. You're probably not going to get out of what you want just doing everything by yourself, and lean on your strengths. We do it in our family all the time. Just because of the way schedules and things like that work, I tend to be the one that makes a lot of the dinners, and that's perfectly fine. My wife does a lot of the cleaning and everything on her days off, and we kind of work to each other's strengths to make our family unit great. You do it at work all the time. Certain people have certain strengths. Lean on those strengths and let them be great at what they do. You be great at what you do and come together, and that's where we are. Use all of those strengths to your advantage, and then use your own greatness, your own strengths to help out others. And again, if you see somebody struggling at work, or your spouse is really swamped with work or has a lot going on, step up and use your strength in order to be great. We saw it in the Super Bowl. Saquon led that team all year. The Chiefs said, "You're not going to beat us." So they relied on Jalen's greatness in order to win that Super Bowl. So do that with everything you do, whether it's your family, whether it is even if you're trying to lose weight or get back in shape or something like that. I've been toying with getting back into running, going one last time at it and see if my knees can hold up. But you need to rely on other people to motivate you. So you can't do it alone. And as Nick Sirianni says, you can't be great without the greatness of others. Whether it's motivating you, your family, your work, whatever it is. We saw what the Eagles were able to overcome when they all relied on the greatness of others. Just think what you can do in your own life if you rely on the greatness of others. Hopefully you can take that out into your weeks this week and just be great, but be great with the greatness of others, and things will go your way. All right, some quick housekeeping notes. As always, be sure to follow me on all my social media, Jimbo_Mont at Twitter and TikTok, at Philly Jimbo on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont. Continue to spread the word as we out-trick the algorithm. I'm toying around with some new things. I didn't get a chance to do the interviews on the street as I kind of thought I was going to do at the parade. I decided to crack my first beer at 8:30, and then I figured it was just not a good idea at that point. But I have some ideas with different things. Obviously, all of the work I'm doing with the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame, we're knee-deep in candidates for this year's ballot to put out. So stay tuned for all that. But I have some ideas and some things on the horizon. It's been busy. And with obviously life in general, relying on the greatness of my family, we're busy with sports and everything like that. But I promise you, I keep saying this, I just been trying to find the time to actually work on it. Plus, I work full-time, too, on top of it all, believe it or not. But big things are coming. Be sure to check out my friends at the On Pattison newsletter. Great Philly sports coverage, especially Philly season. Lots of good articles yesterday, and I find myself, that's kind of my go-to for Philly stuff now. Like I read stuff in The Athletic, The Inquirer, and things like that, but I've noticed it's my go-to, especially now that spring training is here. So go check that out. You can get the newsletter delivered directly to your inbox. We are featured in there a couple times a week. So go check out the On Pattison site and get some good Phillies coverage. All right. So let's start with a recap of yesterday's question of the day. We talked about Saquon Barkley being such a difference maker, but my question was, which free agent or trade or acquisition, however you want to describe it, had the biggest impact on their team? And I gave you Saquon Barkley, Moses Malone, and Pete Rose. Came down to Barkley and Moses, and I think that was the right decision. As much as Pete kind of put them over the top, they were a great team before Pete Rose. They just needed that extra guy that had the experience of actually winning. But 62% of you said it was Saquon Barkley. Probably a little recency bias, but that's okay because they don't get to the Super Bowl and win it without Saquon Barkley. Moses is an interesting case, though, because that team was also great. That Sixers team, they just could not beat the Lakers. They were regularly in the Eastern Conference Finals. Them and the Celtics would alternate going back to the finals. They just could not beat the Lakers, and Moses finally put them over the top to beat the Lakers. But it's a good debate, something we might do later this summer when we're not as high on the Eagles, and might have a little bit of discussion on that. Have a couple different ideas for our summertime tournament for this year too. So stay tuned on that. We'll put as they like to say at my work, we'll put a pin in that and come back to it at a later date. But thank you as always for participating in the question of the day. We will have another one later in the show. Do have a couple Eagles notes. Apparently Kellen Moore is bringing in a lot of the guys that are rumored to be bringing in a lot of the guys that he worked with here in Philly. To be on his staff. I don't know if he's going to interview or what that means. So we will continue to monitor that as it goes, as the Eagles themselves are looking for their offensive coordinator. And a happy ending here. I mentioned the Jalix Hunt thing where he got fined for doing the Trent Cole at Bow and Arrow celebration. Rob McElhaney from Always Sunny in Philadelphia offered to pay his fine, stating how ridiculous it was that the NFL was even fining him for that. Hunt, to his credit, said, nah, it's cool. I'll pay the fine. But if you're serious about this, I've heard about this charity. It's from helping kids at Boys Latin High School from my barber. Donate the money there, and let's turn this into a positive. Explode it. Absolutely. And that's why Eagles fans are the best. We get shit on all the time for this, that, and the other. But push comes to shove. This is awesome. So if you want to go do that, go to Jalix Hunt's Twitter. The link is on there. I think you can even go to Rob McElhaney's Twitter if you follow him. But a great charity trying to help the kids there at Boys Latin High School. And the fact that it was a ridiculous penalty and a fine to begin, or not a penalty, but a ridiculous fine to begin with, and now it's turning into something positive, is just amazing. So go support that charity if you would like, and stay awesome, Philly fans. And speaking of the Phillies, some news coming out. They had Amendo Sosa working in left field. I don't know if that means he's going to be possibly a platoon with Max Kepler if he struggles, because by all signs it looks like Max Kepler is going to be the starting left fielder. But I don't mind this. I think Mundo has played some center. Obviously, he can play third. He can play short, probably play second base. But anything that's going to allow him to get more at-bats. And we saw last year when he got some extended playing time, he actually can be a solid major league hitter, especially if those guys are going to continue to chase pitches and swing at bad things. He seems like he is kind of in that Bryson Stott sort of mode where he'll see pitches, work walks, hit where he needs to do. So I kind of like working him out and getting him some reps out there so that way he's able to get more at-bats consistently in the lineup. Full team is in Clearwater, which is awesome. Bryson Aranola missed yesterday because of food poisoning. We're going down in a few weeks. Doesn't make me feel good. I want to know where they ate so I don't eat there. Trea Turner apparently is coming in either today or tomorrow. His wife just had a baby. But first game is on Saturday already. I don't think it's on TV yet, but I'll certainly be tuning in as we're traveling to and from sports and all kinds of stuff on Saturday. But Phillies baseball is back. The other big thing I saw, and I mentioned I read The Athletic, Matt Gelb had an interview with Kevin Long, and the topic of what happened last year came up. And it was interesting what he said. He was like, we're basically telling them, take pitches, don't swing at pitches out of the zone. It just kind of exacerbated once the Mets realized that they were going to swing. They didn't throw them any strikes. So they need to be more patient at the plate. And he mentioned the biggest name he mentioned was Trea Turner. And he was kind of right, but he was kind of sticking up for him. He has a long-standing relationship with Trea. Trea did hit 295 last year, believe it or not. But most of that, like most of the guys on this team, happened earlier in the season when they were patient at the plate, when they were making smart decisions. So my takeaway from it was that Kevin Long basically said, we tell them to do that. It's them not doing it. So I think this was a strategic kind of play by the Phillies to put them not necessarily on blast, but put it out there that, look, we tell them what to do. They're not doing it. So the pressure is fully on the players. So we'll see what that happens. And they're toying around with the idea of possibly putting Trea at the leadoff spot, which, again, I don't hate. You get some speed up there, especially he's more of the prototypical, obviously, leadoff hitter than what Schwarber is. Schwarber obviously has done a great job there, but he's on board saying, I'll hit wherever they put me. And we haven't heard from Trea yet. Hopefully Trea is on board with it too, because I kind of like Turner, Harper, and then either I don't know who they put at third. I guess that was one of the things. Probably Stott would be your 5-hitter. Bohm would be third, Schwarber fourth. But I'm anxious to see just the different tinkering around that Rob Thompson does this offseason or this spring training to see what works and how we go into this season with the lineup, because I think the pitching is going to be fine. They have a plethora of starting pitchers, so I think we're going to be fine. It's all going to come down to the offense. I mean, could they win 100 games again this year? I think so. Could they win 81 games this year? Absolutely, if they play like how they played the end of the season last year and going into the playoffs. But we'll have more on the Phillies and season win totals and all that as we get closer to the season. But I mentioned Bryson Stott, and there was an interview with him. I believe it was the Inquirer. I read this one, where he didn't want to use it as an excuse, to his credit, but he did say sometime in May he tweaked something in his elbow with a nerve, and it caused him pain and like his hand or his arm to go numb. So he said that certainly contributed to some of the struggles. He did say it taught him to be a lot, and he was already one of our more patient hitters, but it taught him to be more patient at the plate. So he's looking forward to translating and bringing that back in here for the this season. So I think those two guys, though, Trea Turner and Bryson Stott, I think we need bounce back years from them. And it's weird to say bounce back, but Trea Turner was terrible at the end of last year. He was an all-star, but overall his numbers were some of the worst he's had in the past 5-6 years. So we certainly are looking for a bounce back from him. But that leads to today's question of the day. Who is more likely to have the bounce back season this year, Bryson Stott or Trea Turner? Get in on the Back to the Future voice and text line, 267-495-8531. That'll get you in. Get that, anything Philly sports related, off your chest. Still want to celebrate the Eagles? Why not? But who's more likely to have a bounce back year, Bryson Stott or Trea Turner? Get your answers in. All right, today we're going to go back to 1983. And on this day in 1983, the Sixers beat the Rockets 127-98. Moses Malone scored 26 points, had 13 rebounds against his former team. And in the process, he scored the NBA's 4 millionth point of all time. Kind of a random stat. I don't know who's the one counting all the baskets. And if you are keeping score at home, you know I like to do this a lot. Currently, 13,800,000 points roughly is what the NBA has right now. Scotty Barnes scored the 13 millionth point back in 2022, so we'll probably hit 14 million within the next couple of years. Likely either late next season or early the 26-27 season, I think it would be. But all of this was taking place while the Sixers were 45-7, dominating the East. Moses was the huge difference maker for this team. But there were talks about a possible player strike starting the first week of April as the players were unhappy. The owners wanted to implement a salary cap and sort of David Stern at the time wanted to bring in some more revenue sharing. So there was a lot of talk about, and the headline in the newspaper, Phil Jasner from the Inquirer on this day said the only thing that could probably stop the Sixers this year is a players' strike. Fortunately, it never materialized. They did reach an agreement, and we know how that worked out. The Sixers did win the title in that 82-83 season. But on this day, it was Moses Malone scoring the NBA's 4 millionth point of all time. Currently, we said it's about 13,800,000. So 14 million isn't that far away. And then finally today, our Black History legacy maker with Philly ties. We're going to spotlight Octavius Cato today. And Cato, to his credit, was a hell of a cricket, which was big post-Civil War, dating back to when we were British colonies. So cricket was big here, as well as a baseball player in the late 19th century. He was instrumental and helped establish Philly as a Negro baseball hub. He created the Pythian Baseball Club, who barnstormed against a lot of the white clubs, were one of the early Negro League teams that just dominated. But he was huge in bringing baseball, especially for black people, in the Philadelphia area. But that's probably not what he's best known for. He was a huge abolitionist in his day. He was a civil rights activist, was big for fighting for African-American voting rights. He fought in the Civil War, but he was big on voting rights and desegregation. One of his big things he did in Philly was trying to desegregate the trolley system at the time. And went out and was urging black people to vote and get their voice heard. Unfortunately for Cato, ironically enough, he was shot on Election Day in 1871 while on his way to vote on 9th and South Street. There is a historical marker down there. Today, the city of Philadelphia honors Cato with the statue on the north side of City Hall. It's pretty cool. It's right around, I think it's the north side. I've seen it. Either way, there's a statue of Octavius Cato out in front of City Hall. And obviously, he is more well-known and probably was more important to him being an abolitionist, a civil rights activist, fighting for voting rights, fighting for desegregation. But to his credit, too, he was a hell of an athlete. He was a great activist and probably even more of just an amazing Philadelphian, a true testament to what... even though I don't live in the city anymore, I still consider myself a Philadelphian, and just a true testament to what this city means. But Octavius Cato, the founder of the Pythian Baseball Club, a huge proponent of Negro League baseball and helped create Philadelphia as one of the hubs of Negro League baseball, as well as a civil rights activist and abolitionist, fought for desegregation and all that. So Octavius Cato, I could go on all day about this dude. He's such his story is awesome. If you get a chance, read up on Octavius Cato. But today we spotlight Octavius Cato and say thank you for all of your efforts on making Philadelphia, in my opinion, one of the greatest cities in the world. On this day in 1983, Moses Malone scored the NBA's 4 millionth point in a 127-98 win over the Rockets, his former team, amid NBA strike talks. We'll have more on the Phillies as we get more reports out of spring training. It's amazing how quickly we have to turn the page. In a couple weeks, we'll be talking about draft combine, free agents, and all that other good stuff for the Eagles. But now, just enjoy being a Super Bowl champion. And remember, as our Super Bowl winning head coach, Nick Sirianni, says, you can't be great without the greatness of others. So as you go through your weeks, try to rely on other people to make your life better and make those around you better too. Because if you're being great, the person sitting next to you is being great, it's contagious. Just like we talk about all the time with our sports teams when they get on a roll or get on a losing streak. All of that stuff is contagious. Greatness is contagious. And just remember, you can't be great without the greatness of others. So spread that greatness like wildfire. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History for February 18th, 2025. My name is Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a Tuesday. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.